There are over 400 national park sites out there. I've been to over 50 of them, which is good but not great. Now, my mom and I have a little competition between the two of us to see who can visit more national parks. In 1 year, I visited 20 national park sites. So the next year, she outdid me and she saw about 50. So she's beating me. She's got a head start on me. She's seen over 100 national park sites. Maybe by the end of my life, I'll have caught up with her. Anyway, I've put together a little video here for you on what it's like to visit a national park, because on our channel, we've gotten many people who have told me that they've never been to a national park before. They're really excited, but they're also maybe a little nervous. They have a lot of questions. I kind of take it for granted that I've been to so many. I live in the West, where there are a lot of scenic national parks, but there are national park sites all over the country. Not all of them are scenic sites. There are others that are cultural. There are battlefield sites. There are historic sites, national memorials. This is kind of a fun trip down memory lane for me. I used a lot of footage from years and years ago and footage that I took this year. So I hope you have fun watching this video, as much fun as I had making it. If you do like it, please click the subscribe button and that little thumbs up button. That really does help me out. And then also, let me know in the comments, what is the closest national park site to you? If you've never been to a national park before, let me give you a little background first. National parks have been around since Yellowstone was created in 1872. It was the world's first national park, meaning it was the first time a government set aside land to be available for recreation for everyone. They did this in the name of democracy. They didn't want these natural wonders to be only available to the rich who could own land like this. Between 1872 and 1916, about 14 national parks and 19 national monuments were created, including places like Yosemite, Glacier, the Grand Canyon, and Devil's Tower. So the government decided it needed an agency to manage these parks. In 1916, the National Park Service was created. The act was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson. The creation of the NPS was a long process that was spearheaded largely by a wealthy man named Stephen Mather. The story goes that he wrote a letter to the Secretary of the Interior about how the parks were being run poorly, and the response was, "Well, if you don't like the way they're being run, then come on down to Washington and run them yourself." So he did. Mather was appointed to be the first director of the National Park Service. His assistant was Horace Albright. These two worked closely together to get the new organization up and running, and established the general direction and many precedents for the Park Service in its early days. When it was created, the National Park Service was given two missions. The first half of its mission was to conserve scenery, wildlife, and historic objects. This is embodied in the Park Service symbol. The trees, mountains, and lakes are the scenery it conserves. The bison represents the wildlife, and the arrowhead outline represents the historical places it conserves. The second half of its mission is to make these things available for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. The general idea here is that everyone should be able to access them. They should be affordable to visit so as not to exclude the poor. Also, they should be developed with roads and trails so that those of us who aren't Bear Grylls can still see them. And that's where the two missions collide. As people visit the parks, they will have an effect on the park. The more the park is used, the harder it is to preserve. So it's a delicate balancing act the National Park Service has to play. Okay, so let's take a look at what it's like to visit a national park. There are 63 national parks, but the National Park Service manages many other sites as well, over 400 in total. These include national monuments, national memorials, national battlefields, and national historic sites. Let's see what it's like to visit some of these sites. We'll start with Yellowstone, which is a park we've covered on our channel quite a bit. When you arrive, you'll see a rustic-looking entrance sign. Almost all parks have an entrance sign similar to this. The signs, as well as the park buildings, are designed to fit in with the surrounding area as much as possible. Since we're in a forest, these are made out of logs. Mesa Verde, for example, incorporates nearby red stone into their sign. An entrance booth is where you'll pay to enter the park. About 2/3 of national parks don't charge a fee, but the big popular ones usually cost around $35 for a weekly pass. You can also buy an America the Beautiful pass for $80, and it's good for any national park for a year. If you're disabled, military, or have a fourth grader, they offer free passes. When you pay your money, you'll get a park brochure like one of these. The brochure will tell you about the park. For the big parks, it'll have a map to help you get around. The entrance booths are staffed by park rangers who do a variety of tasks like collecting fees, answering questions, manual labor, and giving talks. Usually your first stop will be a visitor center. The National Park Service typically has very nice displays, especially considering its limited budget. I'm showing you Bryce Canyon's visitor center because you'll usually see something like this. Yellowstone's a little unusual because it doesn't have a big visitor center right when you enter. Once through the booth, it's like you've entered another world. It's go time. You are immediately in the forest, driving by rivers. You could spot wildlife at any moment and even get in bison jams. Yellowstone would never be accessible to the average person without roads. From the earliest days, the Park Service developed its own philosophy of road building. First, roads should flow with the land as much as possible. They shouldn't blast through the land, they should simply lay on top of it. But sometimes they have to make exceptions. The Going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park is a famous example. This leads us to the second part of their road building philosophy. Roads should present the park to the visitor. They should show it off, preferably in the best storytelling order for people to see the park. In other words, roads should take you on a journey building to a climax. In Yellowstone, the Grand Loop Road starts with Grand Prismatic Spring, then the more playful Old Faithful Geyser, then the grand finale, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Our next stop is Devil's Tower National Monument. National monuments are different than national parks in that the president can take federal land and set it aside as a national monument at any time, whereas with national parks, Congress must approve them. Teddy Roosevelt set aside Devil's Tower as the first ever national monument in 1906. Here again, we see the entry sign and enter through the booth. My mom has trained me well. We always take a picture at the entry sign. A road takes us to the tower where we can walk around the tower. Scenic national park sites are laid out in layers. The first layer is the road, which the park engineers specifically for our viewing pleasure. The second layer is basic trails at the main sites. Groomed or paved trails allow us to see the coolest stuff up close. The third layer is backcountry or extreme activities. In most parks, this involves multi-day hikes. Here at Devil's Tower, the third layer is rock climbing. Yes, you can climb to the top of this thing. One guy even landed on it with a parachute, but I'll save that story for another video. Our next site is Mount Rushmore Memorial. Mount Rushmore is one of my favorite places. Of course, it honors 4 of our greatest presidents: Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. Memorials typically honor an individual or event. Other examples include the Lincoln Memorial and the World War II Memorial. These are typically artistic creations of some sort. As a result, the artist made choices about presenting and interpreting the person or event being memorialized. For example, the World War II Memorial was constructed at the National Mall to memorialize America's role in World War II. Each state has its own section, indicating that this was a nationwide, all-encompassing effort. At the Lincoln Memorial, the designer Henry Bacon made it look like the Parthenon in Greece. Lincoln sits godlike in his Greek-looking temple. At Mount Rushmore, the whole thing is a carefully presented experience. Approaching on the Iron Mountain Highway, the faces are framed in by a tunnel. Upon arrival, an approaching walkway with flags from every state present the faces of the 4 presidents. Walk the President's Trail to see interpretive displays placed at just the right angles for each face. Here, we're attending a ranger program. All national parks have these ranger programs. They are essentially free tours, and they can dramatically add to the experience of visiting the park.
It's an experiment that our founding fathers embarked on when they signed the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson.
In this presentation, the ranger asked those who served in the military, including my dad, to join her on stage for recognition.
This is the only public recognition they will ever receive for their willingness to serve. As they return to their friends and family, please join me in thanking them for their service.
A few years ago, we visited Ford's Theater, and this ranger gave a moving presentation about Lincoln's assassination.
Shall be paid for by another, drawn with the sword.
Our next stop is Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland. This site is dedicated to preserving an important historical event. Here, as with most national park sites, the first thing we see is the Visitor Center. Here, you can talk to a ranger and ask them questions about what there is to do. At Fort McHenry, we learn all about the War of 1812, which is mostly a forgotten conflict. At the time, however, it was known as our Second War for Independence. From it, we received our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. National Park Service visitor centers usually have world-class displays about the park, as well as a movie. This movie is filled with patriotism and old glory.
Inspired by the brave defense of Fort McHenry.
The best part is when the screen pulls back. A lot of people only think of scenic vistas when they think about national parks, but Fort McHenry is a reminder that even if you don't live in the Rockies, you still have national parks near you. Walking around the fort, we enjoy peacefulness, nice scenery, and a deep appreciation for those who fought to keep this country going in its delicate early days. Each park has its own special thing to show off. Here, it's the Star-Spangled Banner. At another National Historic Site, Golden Spike in my backyard in northern Utah, they show off trains. This site commemorates the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, which connected California and the West with the rest of the country. One rail line was started in California, another was started in Nebraska, and like Diamond Rio, they met in the middle. In the middle of nowhere. It takes a drive to get out to this remote place, but in 2019, many people drove out here for the 150th anniversary of the completion of the railroad.
Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Mr. President, final bulletin. The last rail is laid, the last spike is driven.
This event was as big as the landing on the moon exactly 100 years later. National battlefields are also included as national park sites. Gettysburg is the most popular, and having visited it multiple times, it's a place I adore. But there are also battlefields out west. Little Bighorn Battlefield is located in remote eastern Montana and commemorates the battle between the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry and the Lakota and Cheyenne Indians. The U.S. was led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer was famously defeated by the Indians, led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, and the whole event became known as Custer's Last Stand. Here's something to pay attention to when you visit a national park. How are they presenting the park? This is called interpretation, and each park must make decisions about how to interpret its land holdings, whether they be cultural or natural. Here, the battlefield was initially created to honor the fallen soldiers as seen by this monument. Sensibilities changed, and later this Indian memorial was built to help present the event from a different perspective. Another example of this is nearby Big Hole Battlefield. This battlefield memorializes the Battle of the Big Hole between the U.S. Army and the Nez Perce Indians. It's part of a series of parks dedicated to the Nez Perce along the Nez Perce Trail. This is the path the Nez Perce fled to avoid being forced onto a reservation. They even fled through Yellowstone National Park while tourists were visiting the park. A few tourists were in the wrong place at the wrong time and were shot and killed by the Nez Perce. Here again, the early park was dedicated to the fallen U.S. soldiers with this monument. Over time, the interpretation of the park has taken a 180-degree turn. The monument was moved far away, and the only perspective you'll hear in the visitor center is from the Native American side. So think about how the Park Service presents the park. Being funded by taxpayers, the Park Service often has many people in its ear lobbying for specific interpretations. So now we've covered the different kinds of national park sites you might visit, and hopefully this helps you know what to expect when you visit one of them. Let me leave you with one more example. This is Wilson's Creek Battlefield in Missouri. You've probably never heard of this Civil War battlefield, and neither had I. I like to believe the national parks tell the story of America. Whenever I visit a new area, the first thing I look for is to see if there's a nearby national park site. Even the little-known sites help me understand my country. Here at Wilson's Creek, I learned things about the Civil War I never knew before. So, whether you're looking to learn something about America, or just to get outdoors and see the beauty of it, there's something for you at the national parks. Thanks for watching.